Hello and welcome to Sunday Night Conversations, the first episode of the 2024 season. We are so fired up about this. Tonight's episode brought to us by our good friends at Netting Pros. Netting Pros is proud to be the official netting partner of D1 Baseball and Sunday Night Conversations. Netting Pros pride themselves on improving programs one facility at a time. They're the industry leaders in sports facility netting and equipment solutions. You can find their products at some of the top venues in Division I college baseball. Talking about Tennessee, our defending national champs, University of Texas, Arkansas, Texas A&M, Oregon State, Louisiana State, Mississippi State, so many more. Whether it's batting practice equipment, facility netting, custom wall padding, or custom facility improvements, Netting Pros is the top choice in the industry for facility equipment solutions. Visit nettingpros.com today to learn more. So I am joined by Ben Greenspan of Northwestern and Tracy Smith of Michigan. And if you're listening on a podcast instead of the video, I'm from here to four. I'm going to call Ben BG, and I'm going to call Tracy Skip because that's what we call them. So if you're waiting to hear Ben or Tracy, you're gonna be waiting about an hour. So gentlemen, I'm so fired up for this. So let me give you the title. What we're going to do is Big Ten baseball, past and present, and I'll explain that in a second. But where I want to start, Skip, actually BG or Skip, either one of you guys can answer this. I want to know, you guys have been a bunch of different stops together. You've had a great run together now. Of course, you're coaching peers in the Big Ten. What's the origin story of this relationship? Where did it start?
I'll let Ben start.
I'll take it, Roons.
I'm sorry. I'll let BG start. Sorry.
Thank you. It's good.
So the origin of the relationship, Roons. My dad, I was a student athlete at University of Connecticut. My dad was the AD at Indiana, and I wanted to be an athletic director. And at the time, I tore my labrum in my rotator cuff and my shoulder. And so I went back to Indiana to rehab, and my dad said, "Hey, you want to be an athletic director? Here's the real life opportunity to learn." And so my dad and I, he was kind enough to allow me to join him on an interview of Tracy in Oxford, Ohio, and spent the day together over there. It's kind of full circle moment, Roons. They closed the door, kicked me out into the secretary's office, and I watched Arizona State play in Omaha from the secretary's office. And fast forward, training room at Indiana and Assembly Hall was across the hall from the baseball offices. And so while I was in there rehabbing, Tracy was building a staff, got to know him, and talked me into saying, "Hey, you're going to have the opportunity to come out and play and do it in front of your family." And that kind of kickstarted us, I think 2004.
Wow. So Skip, you were interviewing for the Indiana job. Is that right? Like, is that you were at Miami of Ohio and you were interviewing for the Indiana job, and that was that first interaction?
And Ben interviewed me. He and his dad. We sat there, Ben, before you got kicked out.
Yeah.
So he sat there, and I didn't know him, certainly at the time, and so it is kind of funny how life comes full circle. But I was interviewed by young Ben way back in the day.
That's crazy. Now, Skip, you had been at Indiana as one of Bob Morgan's assistants, correct? Before Miami of Ohio?
Yeah, I was an assistant there for 2 years, and so I was an assistant in Miami for 2 years. I kind of played ping pong. I was an assistant in Miami for 2 years, Indiana for 2 years, Miami for 9, and then back to Indiana for 9. So
wow. I remember when I was at Notre Dame, we played against IU when Coach Morgan was there, and we didn't even know he had teeth. He was so intimidating. Like, he just glared at everything and everybody. And then his daughter, I want to say her name was Beth. I could be wrong about Beth. Yeah. She came to Notre Dame, and she was a great basketball player. And I remember her being like super affable and friendly. And I was like, are we sure this is Bob Morgan's daughter?
Oh, yeah.
He was spooky, man. And those teams were good too.
Yeah. Oh, he's a softie.
On-field demeanor, I guess. Oh, so great. That's cool. Hey, so here's let's jump in. Here's where I wanted to start. So the Big Ten, this is me talking. I think the Big Ten, you could argue, is the most important conference for the future of college baseball. Like, obviously, the big two financially are going to be the Big Ten and the SEC. And we could wake up tomorrow and there's like no conferences. It's so chaotic. But as we sit here tonight, these two leagues have all the juice, most of the juice. And so the Big Ten has a very interesting history in baseball. Obviously, like Ohio State in the 60s. I would say Michigan in the 80s, that they had that really good run, and famous players, right? Like Jim Abbott and Barry Larkin and Chris Sabo. People my age, like Michigan baseball, like I've got visuals of that. But then it was kind of like just like a nice little league for a while. Like it wasn't the schools were national brands, but the baseball wasn't like nationally relevant. Again, that's me speaking. I hope that people are not offended by that. But then the 2010s happened, and this league got hot. Like, and I told you guys before we hit record. I remember, I think it was the Big Ten tournament, but you and Purdue. There was Doug Schreiber's best team at Purdue, 2012. They hosted in Gary, Indiana, and that's the regional that Kent State won on their magical run. But I felt like you guys in Purdue in the Big Ten tournament had a really competitive game, and it was a brouhaha, and that got a lot of eyeballs. And for me, that was just like, okay, that's interesting. You have my attention. And then Purdue hosts, and then your 2013 team has to go through Tallahassee on the way to Omaha. And of course, there's guys like Kyle Schwarber on that team. And then the whole decade rolls forward. You guys are this is the part that people don't remember. You guys were a top 8 national seed in 2014. Stanford upset you, but you were the 4 seed too. Like, you didn't fence scrape your way into a top 8 seed. And then Illinois does it the next year in 2015. And, of course, Vanderbilt clips them, the Dansby Swanson team. And then 2018 is Minnesota, where, they could have been a top 8 seed, but they end up having to play Oregon State, who wins the whole thing. And then, of course, Michigan in 2019, they literally play in Game 3 of the College World Series. So I'll start with you, Skip. But like, what do you remember about the beginning of that decade in the Big Ten, and specifically your all's team? Like, it feels like it got good real fast.
It was. I honestly think it was a combination of a lot of things. If you talk about the team in particular, we had a lot of good players. I mean, and that's a result of the Ben sitting on here being, the job done in recruiting. But if you go back to me, the construction of the league, and Ben, you can correct me and step in here. I'm getting older, my memory, but we made some strategic moves with the advent of the Big Ten network. So the Big Ten network was just beginning. It was starting out, and and our brainchild was, let's take our recruiting national. Not, because back then it was still, you kind of recruited regionally. And if you brought in a national player, it was because there was a special relationship or something like that. There just wasn't a lot of it going on. I joke with people all the time. It'd be like, hey, this is, Coach Smith from Indiana University. And kids would be like, where's that? It's like, well, it's the school that Bobby Knight coaches at. And they're like, oh, but once the Big Ten network came into play, people knew you and saw you. So we actually strategically made some hires just to build some network, which then opened that pipeline, which allowed us to assemble a national roster. And not that you can't do it locally, because we talk about that all the time. Like, we want to get the best players, but it really put us on the map, and it allowed us to broaden it. And I think thus putting more depth and more talent on the roster. And back to the games that you referenced, and at that time, even at Purdue, I think you said there were some, we actually had some, battles, some real battles. There were a lot of big leaguers on the field that time. So it was talent plus, just the time, and people were starting to invest in facilities. We were one of Bob Todd, to me, is still the godfather of the Big Ten. I mean, I thought he was doing it at a level nobody else was doing it at the time. Now, Bud Midall, you referenced those teams. Ironically, we just had a championship reunion on campus, and the names that you referenced, those teams are running around there. So I think it was that stair step, and then there was a little lull, but then I think that Big Ten network, and then people investing in facilities and putting money into baseball in the Big Ten.
Yeah. Hey, Ben, before you go, like, when you say Coach Todd at Ohio State, it's like a couple years ago, I went to Columbus for the first time. And like that's the part I think people nationally are missing in college baseball. It's like, you go to Ohio State's baseball stadium and it's like, whoa, like, this is not a cute, small facility. Like, this, if they hosted like a regional or super regional, it would be bonkers in there. Like, they could easily do 5,000 or 6,000 people, I would think.
Which they were doing pretty consistently back in that time too. So, I always try to talk about him whenever I talk about Big Ten baseball, because he was doing it at a high level and consistently, pre us, if you will.
Yep. Hey Ben, give me your perspective on what Skip just said, and I'm going to force you to include Joey Donato in your comments here.
Yeah, I'd agree. Skip gave me some of the credit for building the roster. I think you also have to give credit to Ty Neal. I mean, he was the one that also really helped assemble that group, joining Skip's staff now. But he was a key architect to that group. I think the 2012, the end of the 2012 season, Roons, we left that Big Ten tournament. We lost the Big Ten championship to Purdue, but we left there getting on the bus saying, man, like, we think we could really do damage in a regional in 2012. And we understood that we were behind at the start of the year, but I think we won 15-20 to close the year. And all the freshmen and sophomores that we played consistently just started to become men and physical and comfortable with the college game. I think, like Skip said, the Big Ten network really impacted our program. I think the money and the inflow of money from the Big Ten network into the athletic department helped the investment for several schools in the league. And, if you look at that era, the ballparks that were built, I think really helped elevate the league and put it in a position to have multiple hosts and super regionals and all that stuff. So, I think, like Skip said, going back to the national recruiting, Joey Donato, I mean, he's as good as there was, as good as I've ever been around in terms of a college pitcher. 4 years, just always took the baseball, incredibly competitive, but didn't have to say a word, and you could just feel his presence.
5 foot, 10, 9, 10 of him, right?
Yeah, it didn't matter though. I mean, he was so competitive. I mean, and I think holds a lot of records. The wins, I think, strikeouts and innings at IU. But that team was a lot of fun, and 12 was fun, 13 was fun. I think of the 13 group, Skip, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe we went to Florida and won 2 out of 3 during our spring break trip. And that was like, we knew we were good in 12, but when we went to Florida, it took 2 out of 3 from a program that had been really good. We're sitting in the dugout that Sunday, and it was like, okay, we can be really good. And we had established at Indiana over the previous several years, we could always really hit, but that team in 2013 could really pitch it too. Top 10 team in the country in ERA, anchored by Donato, Slagers, and then the emergence of Corson Carr and Kyle Hart and so many guys on the mound that, in my opinion, really embraced their roles. And
I think we had 4 big league arms on that team, didn't we? On that staff.
Good group.
And this is a question for both of you guys. Like, I think about Slagers was an Arizona kid where you guys really took a flyer on him. Like, he was not, as I understand it, he was not really a successful high school pitcher. But Arizona's good high school baseball, and he's 6'8", and there's something to dream on there. Donato is that's a San Diego kid. Like the whole West Coast. Like, it's not lost on the West Coast that San Diego's got great high school baseball. So it's like you have to differentiate, like, why are teams passing on him or that type of thing. We'll get to the hitters in a second, but tell me about, like, when you go, outside of your, your sweet spot area in recruiting, like, how do you get comfortable with, okay, why aren't these teams saying yes, but we're good with this?
Well, I mean, he was a funny story. Ben knows where I'm going with this one, but he was a funny story in the recruitment because a really good friend of mine, Dom Johnson, in San Diego, who I trust a lot, is talking all about this, Donato. So we go see him, and of course we like him, but I go back to, I like big body, projectable body guys. And Joey didn't quite fit that profile, but we made him an offer, and I'll leave that private what the offer was. But I remember we were kind of at that point, like, okay, a lot of interest in Indiana because campus is different. And when the kids actually get on a plane and make a visit, they actually love the campuses in the Midwest. And so anyway, we're kind of hung up, and they asked for, I'll just say 20% more. And I said, all right, here's what I'm going to do. We'll up that offer, but he's got to show us that he can miss bats, but being Donato, fly back out there. And what do you think he does that game to get the extra 20%? I think he punched out 14 or something, right, Ben? Literally, I think he punched out 14 guys, and we're like, okay, you've earned it. And that's kind of how it all happened. And he's, I don't know how he flew under the radar. Maybe it's, again, body type or the early recruiting and things like that. But there's so many good players around the country in general, particularly though in California. We feel like we got pretty lucky with that one.
That's good. Hey, Ben, let me take you to the hitters. So like Schwarber's really interesting. If I'm not mistaken, like every single relative went to Ohio State. I could be wrong about that, but like he's an Ohio kid. And then, like Sam Travis was a great player on those teams, and he's a Chicago kid. And it always feels like that like Indiana and Chicago, that's a pretty clear pathway. And then Dustin Demuth is a, LaPorte slicer. And, like that's now him not going to Purdue is weird, I guess. I don't know. You guys, I don't know the background there. But and I say that because Doug Schreiber's dad is like the most famous Indiana high school baseball coach ever, and that's the same high school that Demuth went to. So tell me about the hitters, BG. Any interesting stories in that group?
Yeah, well, Demuth, that family, sister played basketball at IU. That helped. They lived in Bloomington before moving up north, so that helped. Familiarity, but yeah, I mean, another guy that had an incredible career. Another guy that we were lucky to have, similar to Joey, for 4 years, and just an absolute mainstay. But yeah, he in 13, I think he led our team in hitting and All-American and did so many things. I mean, he stole bases. He was unbelievable at third. Obviously, Schwarber was great. People don't realize this. Sam Travis won Big Ten Player of the Year over Kyle, and he won Freshman of the Year prior and Player of the Year the following year over Kyle. And brought an element of toughness and such incredible presence to the box. And it was, I mean, 1 through 9, you really had to work through that lineup. I think of Donley tucked into the 5. Basil was old. Casey Smith had a great year. Will Nolden had a great year.
That was my favorite player, by the way. But
yeah, it was just a really long lineup to navigate and really good hitters all the way. And, at a time when power numbers in college baseball were down significantly, to have a guy like Schwarber, hit as many homers as he did, totally changed our team.
That's awesome. What about like when Kent State did what they did like, I would imagine schools in the Midwest, maybe you guys had played them but I would think I've never put 2 and 2 together here, but like, were schools in the Midwest like, dang, like, yeah, sure. Why not? Like what was their impact on the Midwest?
Well, I remember playing at Miami. I think there was one year, I got to check my research here, do the fact checkers out there. But there was one year, I think they actually led the nation in ERA when I was coaching at Miami, either as an assistant, whatever. So Birkbeck, mainstay there, has done a fantastic job. But I remember, it's funny you brought that up. I remember watching them win and going, God, I just like that professional jealousy, or like, God, I wish, that was me. Just going, I want to do. And I remember that. I was like, man, that is so cool. How cool for that Northern school. Nobody thinks you should do it. And they're going to the College World Series, and how good that must feel. And then, of course, a year later, we got to have that same feeling.
That's awesome. All right. So BG, so we fast forward a year. So Purdue hosted, but they had hosts in Gary. They didn't have their new facility yet, or at least it was in flux, I suppose. And then you guys, this is easy to misremember. You actually hosted a regional in Bloomington and then went to Florida State. So I'm going to have you focus on the regional, and then Skip, I'll take you. But feel free to jump in there too. But then we'll go to the super. There's this old wives' tale that the first time you host, it's going to be a hot mess. Everyone's going to be spooked. No one's going to know what to do. It's very distracting. And we do see a lot of first-time hosts get beat. That was not what happened to the Hoosiers, though. Tell me what you remember about that regional, BJ.
It all comes down to that first night. The opening night for me, we're playing Valpo, and they had an old right-hander on the mound. I forget his name, but dominated us with cutters all night. And we were trailing late, and Chad Clark, who at that point hadn't hit a homer all year, hit a walk-off homer. And I feel like we could finally breathe. I felt like you said, Roons, that uptight tension, big crowd, first time hosting, and now all of a sudden it's like now you're chasing the whole game. And once Chad hit the homer, I felt like you could breathe. Our guys relaxed. Then we played and kind of rolled through the rest of the regional. But if he doesn't do that, who knows what happens with that run.
Skip, what do you remember about that first time hosting experience?
Well, definitely that, but going back to your original question about this construction of Big Ten baseball, and I tell people, like, ironically, it coincided with the addition of that new stadium. I mean, opening that stadium up and facilities. And Ben, Florida was in that regional, right? If I remember,
As a 3 seed, correct?
Yeah.
Yep.
So I
And
remember
Austin
Sully. We jumped in the car and we drove up to the old facility. The old facility was still there, the old Simbauer, and you probably remember it, Roons. Like, it was a glorified high school field. And I can't, you know how Sully talks, so I can't say it on national, airwaves here. But he's like, "How did you guys recruit this team to this facility?" Because the 2013 was the first year we played in the new stadium. And, it was a simple response. It's like, people, we sell people here and people matter. So going back to, Ben's right. Like, we had some interesting cast of characters on there. I mean, Chad Clark, the kid that hit the walk-off home run. Yeah, he hadn't hit one his entire time. And it hits a 2-out, 2 or 3 run dinger to win it all. And that was kind of like, it's like the NCAA basketball tournament. You get by that game one, you can finally settle in. And there's also kind of really another famous, they have Chad Clark Day every year. They continue to do that at Indiana, but there's also the catch. And there was a catch. And I actually play it for our team all the time because I'm telling my center fielders, like, be a ball hawk. We had a guy, so Justin Curita made an unbelievable catch, which turned into a double play when we were playing Austin P in a tight situation. And so those were 2 plays, but it was like, how you get that feeling? We're like, man, we just can't be beat because guys are playing well. They're feeling good, going our way. And the crowd. And I remember too, standing on the concourse at one time and seeing people actually in a line to get tickets. And that was it just hit my mind, like, you know what? We've arrived on the college baseball scene. I mean, we've been building this thing for years. I mean, and again, Ben's dad was a part of that, DAD, that, took a chance on hiring me. And then, Fred Glass and others that came after it. It was just this culmination of, like, what a beautiful weekend, and then we win it on, we win it. And then the next step.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you guys, fast forwarding, you're getting sent to Tallahassee. That's who, Florida State, if people go back and look in this new era, like since 1999 when we've had super regionals, it's unbelievable how many times Florida State has not only hosted a regional, but won it. Like, they never lose a regional, like almost never. Now, they have gotten clipped in some super regionals, but still very intimidating place to play. They're well coached. They're super talented. Yeah, Skip, why don't you take us? Give me your recollections of the super.
Ben's smiling right now. I think Ben should comment on how tough it is to play in that environment. Ben, do you want to, like, prelim that first?
As a third base coach?
Well, the number of times we'd be in the dugout and we'd look at each other and he'd say, is so-and-so in the right spot? And of course, then I'd say, like, what? He'd be like, is so-and-so in the right spot? And you can't hear. I mean, it's so loud, and the chants. I mean, it's the people are on top of you. The super regional atmosphere in Tallahassee that year was unbelievable, Roons. I mean, it was incredible. And the one guy that we haven't talked about on that team yet, Roons, that was so incredible to me was Will Corson Carr, because he was a freshman that didn't pitch a ton for us. And in the early part of the season. And then we got hot late and started going to him a lot. And he was a guy that took the ball in absolutely critical spots over the course of the Big Ten tournament, and then the regional, and then the super regional. And it changed our whole pitching staff.
You remember Ben? So they had mowed through their regional, I think, if I remember, and just really dominated their opponents. And back to Ben and Will and what he said about Will Corson Carr. I think it was late. We were trying to hold on to a lead. It's game one. We're beating, Indiana beating Florida State at Florida State, and we go to Corson Carr late, and we're like, and I think we're up a run or something like that. And anyway, it's first and second. He comes in, like, throws a wild pitch right away. And I remember standing on the third base rail, and here's a wild pitch. Here comes the ball rolling over at my feet. And you're just like, oh, what a great move that is. Here's like tying run and winning run. And then, and that was with less than 2 outs, but then found a way to pitch his way out of it. And, and after you get that game one, now your mind starts playing tricks with you. You're like, wait a minute, if you win one more, we're going to the College World Series. And but our guys really believed, and that is a credit to all the guys. I know we're probably missing Ben names on there, the Efrosses and all those guys. They gave us confidence. I can tell you they did me. I won't speak for Ben, but when you're lining up and you're going in, and that's a rarity, because I'm a pretty confident dude. Ben's a confident dude, but we had a locker room full of guys that just really believed we're going to win. I don't care who we're playing, and so that was really cool to experience.
So it wasn't. Oh, but you were right too, Skip. By the way, Florida State in the regional 3-0, 32-4. They just bum rushed it, and then you guys scored 21 runs in that. Like you beat them 10-9 and 11-6. Besides Schwarber, was it like Schwarber? Like you can't watch the Phillies and not see Kyle Schwarber, right? Like he feels like literally the heartbeat of that team. Who else? Like was Sam Travis? Like I just assume every Chicago guy's a big talker.
Well, he hit a big home run in that thing. I remember Ben laid. The one that stood out to me that I still think when I think back to that series was Justin Curitin, who was probably hitting 9-hole for us. And it was late in the game. We had got bases loaded maybe or something. But anyway, he caps one, shoots it down the right field line for multiple RBI triple in the 7th or 8th. And it was when he came sliding around there, you're picking him up and high-fiving him after that. But that's when your mind goes, you know what? We're winning this thing, and it was just everybody pitching in. And Ben, you said, like, you couldn't think it was so loud. We had a whatever run lead, even in the second game. And we got all these pitchers that crowd got to us. That thing wasn't over. I think they either got tying run on deck or something like that. We had a decent lead. So that thing took the last hour, but when that last out was made, it was a lot of emotion of everything that had gone into, not only for Indiana, well, I'll back up, not personally for the university, but also for the conference that, hey, you can win in the Big Ten Conference and get to the World Series. So a lot went into that.
Did you guys hear because to your point, Skip, and I think I said it earlier, like your 2013 trip was the first Big Ten team to Omaha since 1984. So however many, I guess that's 30 years basically. Did you guys hear from all your peer coaches in the Big Ten? I would imagine the whole league was fired up, or maybe not so much because that's going to hurt recruiting a little bit.
Yeah, Ben, did you hear from anybody? I didn't hear from
oh no, congratulatory text.
Yeah. I did. It was funny you said. I remember at the hotel in Omaha, I was on an escalator, and Barry Larkin was on the escalator, and we were talking about, hey man, the last time this has happened, I think you were in it. On 84. I remember that vividly.
Yeah, that was that was incredible. And then of course you guys are a top 8 seed the next year. And then, we mentioned Illinois had that incredible year the next year. And then, Minnesota, I had the super regional that Minnesota lost to Oregon State. And I remember thinking, man, if they got sent anywhere else, like they had a really nice team, but that Oregon State team was a joke. I mean, they'd forced their lineup had 4 first-rounders in it that didn't include Stephen Kwan. I mean, that was a incredibly good Oregon State team. And then, of course, Michigan in 2019. It's not just that Michigan played in Game 3 of the College World Series finals. They had to go through UCLA. Like UCLA, it's easy for people to forget, even though Vandy won the national title that year, they were not the number 1 seed in the tournament. That was UCLA. And that was a really incredible UCLA. Vandy was the number 2 overall seed. So anyway, that just an incredible decade for the league. All right, so let me read my second break here, and then we're going to fast forward to what happens next in the Big Ten, and we'll put a little we'll do a little summary of the first part of the conference. So I want to also remind everyone that this episode is brought to us by our good friends at Netting Pros. Netting Pros, the top facility equipment and netting supplier in college baseball. To learn more about Netting Pros, nettingpros.com. And again, I want to say this off script. The guys at Netting Pros are so awesome. Like their stuff is amazing, right? Like you want to go to Netting Pros because their stuff's so good, but these are people that truly love college baseball. Like when you're getting the best of the best and these people really care about our sport, to me, it becomes a no-brainer at that point. So again, thanks so much to our friends at Netting Pros for their sponsorship of D1 Baseball and also this podcast. All right. So BG and Skip, the beginning of, so since the pandemic, the Big Ten got it off to a rough start coming out of the pandemic. If you look at it in 2021, I think that was the year the Big Ten did not play outside competition. They only played Big Ten schools. I think they played 44 games. 3 teams made the NCAA tournament. And, RPIs were a hot mess. I feel like 2022, though, is when the Big Ten was really penalized for that. The Big Ten only got 2 teams in the tournament. Now, Maryland hosted. Now, of course, Connecticut upset them in that regional, but that was really a downer for the Big Ten, in my opinion. 2023 and 2024, it's been 3 teams each, but still, like, when I think of the Big Ten, this should be a 4, 5, 6 bid league, and that's even before these 4 West Coast schools are coming in. So, so the first part of the decade, I feel like, has been a setback for Big Ten baseball. But now, we're through the pandemic and we fast forward, and there's a lot of stuff going on, like the Big Two now, the SEC and the Big Ten being the big money leagues. You've got, 4 really good baseball programs coming in, and USC and UCLA, and Washington went to Omaha in 2018, and Oregon's a school that's been to back-to-back super regionals. And so I'm going to give you guys 5 ideas where, if I had the remote control for Big Ten baseball, here's what I would do. But I want you to comment on these, but also, like, if you would move one up, or if there's a different idea, whatever it is. But here's the 5 things that I would work on immediately. So Coach Rooney is the Big Ten commissioner.
I'm excited to hear
this. Yes, for the next 28 minutes. I'm excited. This is no accountability leadership, because it's make-believe. But I would make the league 30 games. I would make your league season 30 games. Now, this one I don't feel as much conviction, because the other leagues have gotten, like, all the leagues getting bonkers with how big they're getting. But conference record has always been a really big deal to me. Like, I'm not taking a cheap shot at the SEC, but it does hurt my heart when I see 13 and 17 teams getting in the NCAA tournament. Hey, no offense to Arizona last year, but Arizona was 12 and 18 in the Pac-12. I coached in the Pac, and I don't want to see 12 and 18 teams in. And I think people forget, Ole Miss was not 12 and 18 in the SEC when they won that. They were 14 and 16. 14 and 16 is palatable to me. But I've always felt the Big Ten was at a disadvantage when you guys are playing 24 games, and you don't even always get the 24 games because of weather, and you've got a team that's like 14 and 7. It just doesn't look as good as a team that's like 17 and 13, when maybe your percentage is better. I don't know, like, not when all the other big leagues are playing 30 games. I felt like it was just a weird look for the Big Ten. So I would make it 30 games, like, whether you guys go play games at neutral sites to start off your conference season because of weather. I just think it would be cooler for Big Ten. I think it would help the perception. I
got one for you there, Roons.
Go ahead, BG.
I love Tony Petitti in my exchanges with him so far. I think we have an elite commissioner, but I think you are thinking along the same lines, and we haven't released the 25 conference baseball schedules yet, but we're going to 30 games starting in 25.
Awesome. What do you guys think? Do you agree with me that that's a good move for the league?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I, to your point, I want us to do something with those additional weekends we're adding on, because, and I know you're going to get to one subject here, so I won't steal your thunder, but, a lot of us can't play at home, those first few weekends, and we should be taking the bull by the horns and really using that as an opportunity to go to a neutral site and just blow it out on a Big Ten baseball weekend. There's a lot of internal talk about that right now amongst the coaches, just because of our current situation with when the season is and where we are geographically. But yeah. I was sitting here in my mind, I'm like, I think we are going to 30 games.
Yeah. It's awesome. So this is great news. And you're right, Skip. Like, the one thing about the Big Ten is, like, these are national institutions. I mean, I would argue they're world-class institutions, but, like, you guys could go almost anywhere in the country and have a big alumni fan base. It's funny, Matt Schick, who announces for Big Ten or for the ESPN and does the selection show with us, his wife is a Nebraska, like, they're huge Nebraska fans. Nebraska played at Charleston, which is near where they lived, and Nebraska, there was more Nebraska fans than Charleston fans. Like, your guys' fan base is travel.
Yeah, and that's the argument. And again, I wouldn't be surprised as this continues to develop. There's so many new things happening in our sport right now, but I wouldn't be surprised if something like that does happen.
Yeah.
Over the next year or so. because it would be good. It would be, to me, it'd be good all the way around. It's more exposure to the Big Ten. It allows, to play and really make an event out of it. So 30 games, I think we're both in agreement with you.
Yes. All right, good. That's good. It's great news. All right, so my number one priority would be 32 hosts, where the whole NCAA tournament becomes 3-game series until Omaha. Omaha, I would not change that format, but that would add a week to the season. So, and we have 2 dead weeks between the end of our season and the draft. So I feel like we've got some wiggle room there. But I just, like, athletic directors don't really get excited about baseball until they it's like right in their nostrils, and like everyone will tell you that. And when the way you do that is you host the postseason. And I think we don't have great parity at the top of the sport right now. The SEC is dominating the top of the sport. And the only way you change that, well, there's other ways you could change this, but I think one of the ways you change it is shrink sample sizes. And I just think 3-game series is what we play every weekend. I think it would be really, I think it would be just good for the whole enterprise. It'd be more compelling. I think it'd be financially beneficial to all parties involved. But think about this, you guys. So in the last 4 years since the pandemic, the Big Ten has had one host school, just one, Maryland in 2022. If we had 32 hosts where, the 2 seeds are hosting, it would, instead of being 1, it would be 5. There would have been 4 more Big Ten schools that would have hosted that first weekend. And so, and again, to your point, Skip, this would happen during good weather. I just think there's so many positives to it. It is very unique. And I'll tell you, my biggest fear, I wrote an article about this year, is that our current format is so awesome and exciting. It's like you're afraid to fiddle with it. But I think this would be just awesome. What say you guys here?
I think I'm on the same page, Roons. I think it's really good for the game. I think it's really good for a number of institutions that get to host. Like you said, our game is 3-game series for whatever that is, 16 weeks prior. And that's the true measure of a team, in my opinion. Like when you go to a regional format and someone can throw off and then they throw their ace, and you couldn't do that, and now you're playing each other, it changes. I think there's some unfair advantages. And so I think you play 3-game series all year. You learn how to try and win every series. That's the postseason should mirror that.
What say you, Skip?
I say that I'm getting old and I don't care what people think about me, so I'm just going to speak. It's like, it's what he's right. We already have a disadvantage. There's a disproportionate number of teams from certain conferences getting into the end. So the fact that they're hosting is already a disadvantage. I always say this, they've created the term home field advantage for a reason. Mm-hmm. It's the ancillary stuff that Ben talked about that we gave a lot of dialogue to as a conference group of head coaches about a week or so ago, that I wasn't even thinking like that. That if you do that, just the competitive nature, and we were saying, yeah, it's tough to beat that host school in that current format, because as they said, what do most of them do? If they're the number 1 seed and they draw a 4 seed, and again, no disrespect to some, but what do? They throw off. So now it's just totally skewed in that system for that to happen, where they should advance. If you do the 3-game set, well, guess what now? Whether we're on the road or hosting, whatever the case may be, you can't throw off. Like you can beat somebody in a 3-game series. So I love it for that fact. So I'm hoping that happens for sure. I think if that happens, you're going to see I would anticipate a different composition in Omaha. Yeah. So I'm 100% behind you on that suggestion, Mr. Commissioner.
Yes. When you guys say pitch off, I always think about 2001 when we were at Arizona State. We were the 2 seed at Fullerton, and the Fullerton was rolling. Like it was just big leaguer after big leaguer. And Temple was, from my beloved city of brotherly love, was in the regional. And I used to, chip at the West Coast kids about, the toughness and charisma and so Temple's in there, and I'm popping off about Temple. And Fullerton throws a kid with 6 innings on the season. It's game 1 of a regional, and their starting pitcher is logged 6 innings. And Temple, like, no score after 1 inning. I'm like really getting loud now. And then it is 15-0 before Temple gets another out. Like it was just a bombing. And so anyway, I'm with you.
But you're right. Is that good for college baseball? I would say that's not. Like there's a way to remedy this.
Yeah, it was bad for the Sun Devils that weekend, that's for sure. How do you guys feel about, so if we went to a field of 72, these are two separate ideas, but we went to a field of 72, I don't think we could go field of 72 with the current format, because then teams would be playing 6 games. You could play 6 games in a regional weekend coming out of conference tournaments. Like, that would be a formula for disaster pitching wise. But we could implement a field of 72 with 32 hosts, and then we'd have a Thursday night playing game at 8 of the sites. And that would give a little bit of an advantage to your top seeds. And then it's Thursday night, I think it would be really compelling thinking about squeeze play. Like, it's you win and you stay, you lose, you go home. It's a 1-game play-in into the NCAA tournament. I see really good teams getting left out year after year. And I know, like, some of the big conferences will get more teams. I'm totally okay with that. They're not going to get all 8 teams. I'm totally okay with them getting more teams if some of these teams that are getting left out are in. But I think reasonable minds can disagree. I've had some very rational people disagree with me that, hey, 64 is kind of like the perfect number. BG, what say you on that? You like 64 or 72?
I like 72. I think 64 is a good number, but I think similar to the NCAA basketball tournament. I mean, those play-in games generate excitement, create opportunity for a few teams that are on the bubble that don't get in. Now they're getting in. And I think about it, with some of the metrics that people use to build a case to be in the tournament or not. If there's a little bit of grace there, maybe it gets somebody in that maybe doesn't have the best RPI, but they pass the eye test, or vice versa. So I think the more opportunity to get into the postseason, the better. I think that's a good number. I don't think you want to go much past that.
Yep. Skip, what say you?
I don't feel too strongly, honestly, either way. I'm not smart enough or have done a deep enough dive on it. But now, would you qualify that with, would you be eliminating some of the automatic qualifiers in the 72 number, or keep it as is? Or
they would still get in, but like, I would take the bottom AQs and they would have to be part of the playing game. Now, I would argue that like that would be better for them, because if you look at it statistically, like our 16 4 seeds last year, if I'm not mistaken, only Evansville and SEMO even won a game. Everybody else was 0-2. And that's pretty typical. Like, so some of the AQs would have to play a Thursday night game, but they'd be playing against another 4 seed that's a more and they'd have all the attention, instead of, no offense, like they show up in a regional and just get whacked twice, which doesn't always happen. But and the way I would do it is I would take the bottom 4 leagues by RPI or whatever metric, and they would be the leagues that would be part of the play-in.
All right,
so
I'll buy that.
Yeah. So I think that's either way. So I get 1.5 more. I would expand the Big Ten tournament. I would want more than 8 teams in there, like more than 8. I do like the tournament. Like, it's a real true blue tournament. It almost looks like blood sport from the outside. Like, it almost looks, honestly, it looks too grueling when you start thinking about the NCAA tournament. That's just one man's opinion. But now that you have the 4 more teams, and I want more exposure for the league. And I feel like when it's only 8 teams, that hurts it a little bit. But I don't know. I could see both sides of this. BG, what say you? You like the current format, or you'd like to see it expanded?
Roons, you're essentially the commissioner,
right?
Because
Are we already
you nailed the 30 games, and I think we're going to expand it to 12.
12, okay.
So I like it. Yeah, I think it's good. I think the tournament generates such excitement in Omaha, especially when you have Nebraska playing as well as they've played, and Iowa playing as well as they've played. You're able to play in front of incredible atmosphere in Omaha, and so I think it's a great thing. I think it's coming. That's the plan, is to go to 12, and I think that's a great number.
Yep. Skip, what say you?
No, I've always been a proponent of a broader postseason tournament, conference tournament, if you have the chance for multiple bids, but if you're a one bid league, I was always about shrinking that number. Yeah. So I do think the Big Ten should be a multi-bid league based on the quality of play and the teams in it. And yeah, put more in. But again, I think besides all that, I think you've gotten inside information on this little thing tonight, because here we are again.
It's good. It's the confirmation podcast. Yes.
Yeah, you're out awesome. So we are going to a bigger tournament. So I agree with it.
Yeah, that's cool. I love that. That's really good. Hey, what so I'll give you this topic, and then I'm going to come to you first, Skip, on this. So I think what I wrote down is leverage the Pac-4. Like, how does this league leverage these four Pac-12 schools coming in? And here's one of my concerns. Whereas the the Big Ten network was an advantage when you guys were at Indiana, I feel like it's become a big disadvantage the last few years because I feel like the other leagues have all congregated on ESPN Plus, and you guys were just on an island. And even as someone like I'll give you an example. Like, Iowa was a really interesting team last year, and I personally did a terrible job seeing them because I had every other game sitting there in front of my eyeballs on ESPN Plus. Now I'm wondering if maybe this will be improved because of the new television contract, and like it does feel like Peacock is growing super fast. But I'm just curious. Like, I feel like the ACC and the Big 12 and the SEC and even the Sun Belt and the Big West and some of these good leagues, they get so much exposure on ESPN Plus. And if you're a college baseball fan, you have ESPN Plus. That is a concern area for me for the Big Ten. What are your thoughts there, Skip?
I think you need to get Ben and I off here and call Mike Gambino and let him go on a rant right now.
No.
Yeah. This was a huge hot button in our meeting recently, to exactly your point. The exposure piece, that it needs to be better. And I'll let people, I don't want to speak on subjects I'm not an expert on, but I'll let people figure that out. But I do think we have a problem in exactly what you just said. It's hard to find Big Ten baseball, and if people find it, the feedback that we've gotten, it's been very random, So yeah, there's got to be a way, a formula, and I know it's on the commissioner's radar to leverage the position of the Big Ten conference, because there's the trade-off. The thing that I've noticed in all of the new legislation, the dialogue, the different things you hear is we don't want this big disparity between the conferences in what they're doing, SEC and ACC, and what the Big Ten's doing. So this to me would be another piece of that. Like, so why would we want this big discrepancy in the visibility of the power conferences? So I agree with you 100%. Like that's something we need to really, really look at. I hate saying it, although I said I'm old, I don't care when I say it anymore. I don't know how much thought, I don't know where that is in our pecking order. But again, I laugh, and I don't want Michael call me tomorrow and be like, "What are you doing talking?" Yeah. But like, he thinks that needs to be first and foremost. And there's part of me that agrees with that. Like, we need to be blowing this out. We got a huge opportunity here, and this is something we could capitalize on.
Yeah, 100%. What BG, and you could comment on that too, but what are other ideas? Like the elephant in the room is the move the season back, and I'm less of an extremist there. Like, part of, like, if I was in charge, part of what I would do is I would do 32 hosts immediately, and I would slide the season back 1 week, because we do have 2 weeks that are just dead weeks between the season and the draft. But that's only a week. But I think the other thing is I think the 32 hosts would benefit the Big Ten more than any other conference. Like, I think your percentage increase of hosts would be more than any. But you tell me, BG, like, is that the other idea that could really impact this league, or is there something that we're whiffing on?
Yeah, I think if you can push it back, it helps the league tremendously. I do. I just think that you travel within the league, the crowds in March versus the crowds in May there's such a discrepancy there. And when you get nice weather in the Big Ten, the environments are great, especially for a big game. I mean, you have tremendous atmospheres in a lot of places. And so I am a proponent of moving it back. I think it'd be good for Big Ten baseball. To answer your question about how do we leverage it, I do think we need to get better on TV. I think the uniqueness of the geography of the league can help us too. You're able to really, you're able to put games on for several hours, versus a league that's solely in one time zone. And so I think if we can get that right, there's an opportunity to create even more eyes on our league. I think the host site, the 32 host, aside from moving the season back, the 32 host is probably the top priority for me. That would be great for the Big Ten. That would be great for college baseball. I don't care what league you're in. You have more opportunities to host. You should be excited about that. And realistically, you have more opportunities to advance out of a regional, even if you're not a host. So I think that's good for the college baseball. I think it's good for Big Ten baseball. So I guess, Roons, I probably am a little bit more of a proponent of pushing it back than you.
Yeah. Well, the 32 host is like to your point, like that. So many times you hear these ideas, and it's like we need to take this away from the SEC. And for me, like as soon as I hear that idea, I'm like, we could just stop talking right now. Like we're like that is like I should go win the lottery too. Like yeah, like I've got a lot of I should hitchhike to the moon, right? Like it's like we're in Fantasy Island. But 32 hosts is an idea that promotes, and again, it's not my idea. It's whoever came up with it. God bless them, and I've just been running with it. But they'd be rewarded, right? Like Mississippi State would have hosted last year, Vanderbilt, but it's great. Anyway. Well, Skip, where do you like you guys have both coached in the South and the North, so I think you have I think like it's a more measured perspective on it. Where do you stand on moving the season back? Like, is there an answer there?
Well, what jumps out to me is your choice of words. Like you said the elephant in the room, and if you go back and you trace the definition of the elephant in the room, means there's a problem. There's an obvious problem here.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and that's where it just blows my mind that we have an obvious problem in a sport that's growing and the numbers. And it's like, I tell people all the time, it's like, what other sports out there where one segment of that sporting community is at such a disadvantage because of geography? And I always go back to like, yeah, it is a problem. There's things you got to work out, but we got a lot of smart people out there. And this isn't that rocket science. I mean, this is a very solvable problem. And the fact that we haven't done that collectively as an organization, to me, it says one of basically two things. Either we're not smart enough, which I don't believe that. I think we're super smart enough, or people have individual interests. And, and I'll say this, like, Ben, I've coached in the Pac-12, and I can remember, our dialogue on that at the time. And we kind of just glossed over it in the room. And again, I'll sit here and say, I think it was a lot because it was just selfish reasons. Like, hey, we've got an advantage. Why would we want to do that? But if we collectively, as a body of baseball people, don't think moving the season back would be good for the entire sport, we're lying to ourselves. I mean, I truly feel that. So I guess I'm tired of talking about it at some point. I hope that we could do that. I know our commissioner, that's on his radar. But to your point, what are some of the low-hanging fruit that we can do that helps the cause immediately? But we've got to move the season back at some point. I mean, why we don't does not make sense at all to me.
Do you guys have a length of time that makes like when Eric Bakich did that proposal, I think it was like 4 weeks was kind of like the sweet spot. Is that what you guys think?
Yeah. I mean, it's like right now, Ben, you're getting used to it, but I think it's always that in the North. I mean, I spent now 20 years of my career coaching in, Northern climate, if you will. And it's those first 4 or 5 weekends you struck playing at home. We talk about RPI problems, all that. Well, here you have it, because you got a significant segment of your participating institutions playing on the road all the time. And back to my statement, home field advantage was created for a reason. Why do we see all these things that are skewed towards? So we've got to put our selfish reasons behind and actually do something that's for the good of all of college baseball. And I think we really could blow this thing out if we do that. I really do.
Yeah. I also think that like the low hanging fruit stuff we talked about today really helps those conversations, because when the Big Ten disappeared after the pandemic for kind of, well, at least that 1 year, I can't remember what it would look like in 2022. It might have been still a little wonky. I could be wrong there though, but it's like that hurt the cause of that conversation, because but some of these low hanging fruit ideas, the Big Ten gets to assert itself again in baseball, and now the conversations are different. I think it's more. I just think that they're more viable. People are more open minded to it, and you're right, Skip. Like there's no question that people would have to. They'd have to be thinking about the greater good as opposed to just their own program.
Which is sometimes tough to do.
That's right. We're fighting human nature there. So
yeah.
Very good. Hey, fellas, this was awesome. I knew this would be very fun. Gave me a chance to nerd out on Big Ten baseball in that last decade, and then talk about these ideas. And who knew? Like I swear I didn't have a spy at the Big Ten coaches meetings.
You buy that, Ben? You buy that? I don't know.
I buy it. Not bad.
You were
Kendall,
what? You said, five. You said 5. Were you 5 for 3 for what were you?
No, I only had 2 of them. I had 30 games and I had the expanded Big Ten tournament. That's all. I had 2. I had the two layups, but I promise I did not consult with Kendall. If anybody was going to know that ahead of time, it was Kendall.
True.
So yes, but I all kidding aside, this is, like I miss having you guys down here in Arizona, my backyard. It was I loved watching you guys coach. When you're in Indiana, but especially at Arizona State, getting to develop relationships with you all, and those teams were so fun. And I know you guys are going to do great stuff where you are currently. And, again, like if you're a college baseball fan globally, this league is really important to our sport. Like there's just if we cannot pretend that the Big Ten's not important to the future of the sport. It is critical, absolutely massively critical. And so it's really encouraging to have these conversations. So, gentlemen, thank you very much. Good luck with the rest of your fall. It was a pleasure to see you and have this discussion. I also want to say thank you to our good friends at Netting Pros. Couldn't do this without them. And again, so appreciative of their sponsorship. So that is it. I'll give it I'll give a preview. Next Sunday, our Sunday night conversation is with Pat Casey. And we're going to do how that Oregon State program got built the first time. And then, what does Oregon State do now with this new Pac-12? I think Oregon State is going to be very interesting going forward because we all know that since 2006, no one has won more national titles in the sport of baseball than Oregon State. They have 3. No one else has 3. And so, again, another just a really critical program to our sport. So that is it. Everybody have a great week. We will catch you next time on the D1 Baseball Podcast.